Yeah, welcome everyone. This is the workshop to Joseph Pelrine's workshop on coaching and coaxing self-organized teams. And we really would like you to turn your video on because we really want to see your reactions. That's where we get our feedback and energy from. It's also much nicer to see each other in person. And yeah. If you're also free, if you can, to use the reactions, on the bottom you should see a little emoji where you can do like a thumbs up or clapping. Do you see that? Give me a thumbs up if it works for you. Okay, great. Yes, awesome. Awesome, great. Cool, perfect. And since we're like 22 in total now, Joseph, is it okay for you if we just do questions with hand raising, by raising hands?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It's just I've done this talk a number of times in different versions. This is the first time I'm trying to do it virtually, which means that a lot of the exercises that I would do, we can't do. Actually, this talk is just a very condensed version of a one-day course, a training that I do for coaches and others. So what we thought we'd do would be to spend the first hour plus minus with me just giving you the theory and talking about the ideas behind this. And then we have 30 minutes where we want to try to experiment a little bit. We actually do want to try some things out with you. We'll probably crash and burn on them because we've never had the chance to try it before. But we'd be really interested in your input and in your feedback on this. Okay? If you have any questions, please put them in the chat because I'm going to be doing a couple other things and I can't monitor. My multitasking isn't that good. So Yvonne will be monitoring chat and will, tell me to shut up or feed me the questions or things like that if necessary. And then after we're finished going through the slides and stuff, then I'm open to discussing anything with you. So once again, please, if you don't mind, turn on your camera so we can see who you are. For those of you who are anonymous, there are a couple I see who don't have any names down on the bottom of their picture. Could you put your name in there so we know who each other is? I would really like that.
And how you can do that is by going to your video and press or click the three dots, and then there should be the rename option.
Mm-hmm. Lorenzo, the no-name thing seems to be a bug in the Zoom client. Yes, there are a number of bugs, and there's also some really serious performance issues. Every time I go into a Zoom session, it kills the Bluetooth for my mouse, and which means I have to detach that and then try to get it to connect again, which is, this is new technology. This is the new things that we have to learn how to deal with because this is the way the world is probably going to be from now on. And the question, the big challenging thing that I've been thinking about and I don't have an answer for is, how does self-organization work in a virtual environment? Right? How is it different? How can we coax? How can we encourage? How can we enable this to happen in the environment? So what I would like to do is present you some of the basic theory, some of the basic ideas of this from science, and then I'm open to discussing with you and hearing your ideas about, okay, how can we transfer this into a virtual environment? Because the biggest challenge that we have in virtual environments is that they have a negative valence. They're negatively charged. One of the biggest challenges of virtual environments is what we call the cognitive dissonance, the fact that you're confronted with the fact that you're not together, and you can't forget that. Being online virtually constantly reminds you of the fact that you're not together and everything. And that's a very difficult basis to start building a relationship on. Okay? That's why I was asking, at least, turn on your video. Please write your names in. But let's start out, before I switch over to doing some slides and things like that. What is self-organization? That's a question on you. Could you just write it in the chat, what you understand self-organization to be? Because that's what we're here to talk about. And we just hope that I'm going to be talking about something that you want to hear. What is self-organization?
So please feel free to type your answers into the chat.
Yeah, it's a difficult question, right? Difficult question to describe exactly what it is.
Okie dokie.
Mm-hmm.
So answers are turning in now.
Mm-hmm.
I have a group of people identify and volunteer for work to be done without a centralized boss telling them. Also the ability to plan and execute your plans. When teams are able to understand what they have to develop and to do and cooperate in order to achieve their goals. The ability for a team to decide their actions without being told how. A team that is self-managed, self-sufficient, and self-driven, opposed to command and control.
Adhocracy. Wow. Adhocracy, that's an interesting one, yeah.
Yeah, actually some are quite similar.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, getting things done without anyone telling you how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that quite often now.
Yeah. Okay, a lot of these answers have something similar, and that's a focus on work to be done. All right. What I would like to give you, I'd like you to note at the end of this session is that you actually have a real scientific definition for what self-organization is, and based on that definition, that you're able to apply tools and techniques to help you with your teams in a work situation. That's my goal. But what I want to start from is really the scientific theory about what self-organization, what we understand that to be in complexity theory, okay? So I'm going to try to switch over and share my screen. Hold on for a second. Oh, that doesn't work. Yeah, I used to have this presentation in PowerPoint. Now I have it in this one in Keynote, and it looks like, is this working?
Now we've got it.
Now you've got it. Okay. Coaching and coaxing self-organization. So let's start off. Have you ever seen this situation at work? Seen the fact that nobody cleans up their coffee cups, that there's always a mess in the tea kitchen, and that the secretary, who has better things to do, somehow gets stuck with doing this job every day at the end of the day, until the secretary gets so angry that she goes to the boss and says, either you do something about this or I quit. So what happens? the boss calls together an all-hands meeting and says, look, we have to do something about this, so we're going to put up a list. And, you can volunteer, or I'm going to put you in for times, and you do this every Tuesday, and you do this on even number days, and you do this on days when the sun is shining and stuff like that. So you put together this list. How long does this work? Write your answer, what you think, in the chat. How long do you think that something like this would work?
I'm seeing the answers already. There's something like 1 day, 1 week, 2 days, 1 month maximum. 1 day, 0 days, 2 weeks, 1 week, till the next ping.
Yeah. So I'm surprised that anybody would even get to 1 month, right? We've all seen this situation. This is typical for a complex system, and this is what makes it really challenging to change a complex system, is the resilience, its ability to go back to the status quo. So this is one of the things that this talk is about how can we actually do change in a complex system of a self-organizing team and have that effect last. Okay? The whole challenge, the base challenge is, understanding what is a team and what makes a good team. You've probably seen this, right? You get a group of great individuals together and they are a really bad team. I see this quite regularly. I'm Swiss. Our national football team does this all the time. Right? You get the best Swiss players, put them together in the national team, and we lose every time. This is understanding, putting people together. What do you need in their interaction for them to self-organize so that they become good at what they do? Right? You can put 4 lads together and you can get a group like the Beatles. But come on, you can put another 4 lads together and you get Nickelback. Right? So how can you do about this? Right? So let me tell you an interesting story about this resilience, about this status quo. This young man here is my son. And the lovely young lady next to him is my daughter-in-law. And it was funny, many years ago when they first met, he called me up because he was going to bring her to Christmas dinner. And as all of you know, meeting the parents is a big event in the beginning of any relationship. Now, I had met her before, but my wife had not. And they were very nervous about having her come to dinner, although my wife is a lovely person. So my son calls up and says, look, Dad, can you do me a favor? Can you please tell Mom not to embarrass me? Please tell her, don't treat me like the teenager that I was when I moved out. And I said, look, I'll do my best. But, it works both ways. I expect you to come and treat your mother the way an adult treats their parents and not the way a teenager treats their parents. So they came for Christmas dinner. We sat down, started eating. No, we started drinking first. And everything was nice and polite. How long do you think that happened? How long do you think we could keep up this behavior? For us, it lasted about 15 minutes. But we did get things sorted out. And as I said, they're now happily married. And I am very happy. This is my granddaughter. And now that lockdown is done, I was able to take her out to the zoo. Right? This is what happens, is that we have these structures and these relationships in any complex system. And it's very difficult to change them. Okay? So where does this problem come from? The problem that we have with this and of changing complex systems. Often, it's the fact that people don't understand what self-organization is, or they confuse it with something that we call self-assembly. Self-organization is a lasting change in behavior. If all of us would get together in an elevator And when we got to the floor that we wanted to get to, everybody gets out. Is this self-organization? We moved around in the elevator to accommodate everyone, but after we get out, nothing's really changed. We will go back to our original behavior. That's not self-organization, okay? Self-organization, as we'll learn, occurs as the result of actions and interactions between the agents in the system, in our case the people, with each other and with their environment. So the mantra we'll be hearing is you can change the environment, change the people, and vice versa. Okay? So let's take a look at this. This is a classic case of self-organization. Birds flocking, right? How do birds organize this behavior? Right? Do they call up the airport and put in a flight plan and sit down with each other at a pre-flight briefing and discuss who has seniority and who gets to fly at the front and what their flight route is and consider the weather and everything? So birds don't do that. They self-organize according to a number of very simple rules. There are 3 rules that govern the behavior of birds. First, don't crash into each other. Don't touch each other. Second, fly at the same speed. Don't fly too fast. Don't fly too slow. And third, fly towards the center of the flock. Okay? Don't crash, maintain the same speed, and fly towards the center of the flock. If you fly towards the center and avoid collision, you'll end up flying in parallel. Okay? So what we're getting here are 3 of the basics. Don't crash. Separation. Maintain your autonomy in the collective. The same speed. Cohesion. Become a group. Adapt. This is where the idea of having a common shared goal is. The cohesion defines the group. Without it, members disperse and you have a group and not a team. And the flying towards the center is alignment that gives you direction and purpose. Okay, this works well for birds. This self-organization occurs as a result of the action and interaction of the agents with each other and with the environment, and normally follows a simple set of rules. If you change the rules, you can change the interaction. The problem is it doesn't work that well with people because, as Dave Snowden said, we aren't ants. We don't think rationally. Okay? The only people who think rationally are ones with autism. Our thinking process, we're not very good at information processing. We're very good at pattern matching, according to past experience. And then we rationalize this pattern matching. Okay? So if we think, this comes from the fact that 96% of our biological makeup, our DNA, is still from the Pleistocene, hunter-gatherer times of thousands of years ago. Thousands of years ago, you had to go out and hunt and kill animals in order to have food to survive. Right? But if you were out hunting, out in the woods, and you heard a very big, loud, scary noise, and then saw a very big, loud, scary animal with long fangs and stuff, then amygdala hijacking happens, adrenaline kicks in, and you instinctively fight or flight. Your first fit pattern matching says, run away as quickly as you can from that saber-toothed tiger. We've all experienced something like this where we've been shocked or insulted and don't know what to say or how to act, and only afterwards do we calm down and say, oh, if I had only thought of that 10 minutes ago. This is where best fit pattern matching then comes in. Okay, first fit pattern matching happens because we need to have the instinct to survive. Best fit pattern matching comes in then when our lower thought processes work again. So actually what we, in that case, if we were running away from the saber-toothed tiger, we wouldn't need to outrun the tiger. All we need to do is outrun the person next to us. Okay? So what we do is we act instinctively and then we rationalize our decisions that we make according to what we call the dominant discourse, right? So it might be that I, as a manager, would make a decision, and I could justify that by saying, yes, I made this decision based on an in-depth analysis of all information available to me at the time. Or I could say, I had a dream and a frog told me to do it. Both equally valid rationalizations. Which one would you want to say if you wanted to keep your job? That's the dominant discourse. Okay? So let's go on a little bit. I don't want to get into all of Snowden's reasons. There's a paper out by him that's based on this. Okay? But I think one of the most important things to understand, and if you take one thing away from this, is the fact there are no self-organizing teams. There are no self-organizing teams. That's a concept that was brought up in the Agile Manifesto from someone who didn't really understand what self-organization is. What we have are self-organizing systems. Okay? The idea behind this system is that, once again, self-organization results from the actions and interactions of the agents in each system with each other and with their environment. And if you leave out the environment by only looking at the team, what happens is, we say in English, you don't see the forest for the trees. And then things happen because you ignore or minimize the interaction with the environment. Okay? What happens is self-organization. The actors change as they interact with the environment. The environment forces changes on the actors, but the actors can also change their environment. And this is the trick that we can use. Okay, the most difficult slide in this whole talk. This will get simpler from on. Self-organization is the emergence of a dissipative non-equilibrium order at macroscopic level because of interactions between multiple microscopic components. Order is induced by interplay between intrinsic and extrinsic factors, decays on removal of the energy source, and in this context, microscopic and macroscopic are relative. Wow. I had a problem figuring this out the first time I read it too. So let's go through bit by bit. What does dissipative mean? Dissipative means it obeys the second law of thermodynamics. If you don't constantly pump energy into the system, things are going to die out. You've seen this happen. You start some kind of new initiative, right? Be it washing up the coffee cups, be it we're going to introduce Scrum and have daily Scrums, and after a week or two, things go back to normal. The energy goes back. Non-equilibrium means that the system isn't stable. It's constantly changing because of the fact that we're dealing with people. And the other thing to understand is the fact that this happens at macroscopic level. It happens at a different level than the level of the interaction. So self-organization in terms of teams and people is the emergence of some behavior of something that's bigger than the team. How does this happen, and what can happen from this? Let's take a look at another example. Back in the United States at the beginning of the 20th century, they introduced laws called Prohibition, which means that it was illegal to distill alcohol. The Americans forbid alcohol, which of course anytime you forbid something or make it illegal, it makes it even more interesting for people. So they had, especially in the south of the United States, gentlemen who would hide out in the woods with their stills and distill alcohol. They would often do it in the night when the moon shined, which is where the name moonshine came from. Now, the problem that these gentlemen had was that they distilled the alcohol, but they had a problem transporting it. So the idea that they had was they would get young, testosterone-fueled young men who like to drive fast cars and have them distribute the alcohol for them. Now, what was important was that the cars that the young men drove shouldn't be seen that they were tuned or they were pimped. They should look what we call stock. Okay? So what happens is the young men would have a nice job outrunning the police because they had super fast cars delivering this alcohol. But what do you think happens when young men who have fast cars start getting together? What happened is that they started racing, and from that, there's a whole type of car racing which is known as stock car racing, which emerged from that. A macroscopic behavior emerged as a result of these microscopic interactions. Okay? So let's take a look at what happens here dealing with people. This gentleman, Kurt Levin, a fantastic psychologist and psychiatrist, known as the father of social psychology. He did his PhD in Berlin in 1936, and his major break with the psychological thinking of Freud and Jung was that he said that our behavior is not dependent on the past. It's dependent on the past as much as it could be dependent on the future. Our behavior is a result of the situation that we are now in. And Levin came up with something which is now known as Levin's equation. The behavior is a function of the person and his environment. Now, sociologists have also taken a look at this and said, yes, this applies not only to individuals, but also to teams. Now, if we look at this function, what we see there are two variables that we can change. If we want to change a person's behavior, we can either change the person, and this is where it gets into my field of psychology, or we can change the environment, and by changing the environment, we can change the way a person or people or a team interacts. Okay? So what happens is we change people's roles in this system. Okay? What's important is to understand that the system, the self-organizing system, also plays a role. The system defines the roles that need to be played for the system to exist, and it defines them regardless of the player of the role. If a system defines a role that there is someone who always complains in your team, and that person leaves the team, and you get someone new in, what often happens? This new person takes over the system role of being the complainer. Let's take a look at a couple well-known system roles. One of them is the elephant in the room. Your system has defined a role of something or someone who is there that's not talked about. This is a system-defined role. Okay. Another example, I don't know if any of you have ever worked in Finland. There's a joke that says, how do you recognize an extrovert Finn? That's a person who looks at your shoes and not their own when they're talking with you. In Finland, there's a culture of being reticent and being quiet and not showing your knowledge or not asking questions that might embarrass another person. These are system-defined roles. And it's very important to realize that part of the self-organization process is not only people defining roles and responsibilities, but also the system. Because if all you look at is the team, you're going to run into problems because you're only looking at the forest and you don't see the trees. So, what can we do about this? How can we work on this? This is what you're here for. This is the question of how can we take this knowledge and help it to change and improve our teams. It's quite simple. We said it already. Change the environment, change the people. And believe me, it's a lot easier to change the environment than it is to change the people. It works in both directions. Remember, people can change their environments, and environments will change the way people work. And this is a phenomena that's known as coevolution. And I'd like to show you a video that very clearly illustrates how changing the environment changed the way agents interact without the agents even having any contact with each other. So if we were here live, all live in Lisbon, I would do this live, but for now I'm going to show you a video that a colleague of mine recorded. Okay, what happened here? All of the agents aligned without talking to each other, without interacting in any way. All that happened was that the environment changed. On a stable environment with the board on a table, no interaction occurred. Once he put the board on top of cans, the board was also able to move and interact with the agents. This technique is known as stigmergy or semitonic communication, but it just shows the fact that if you change the environment, you can have a lasting effect on people. Okay? So changing the environment to change how people interact is a very fascinating thing. Let's go on. Let me show you another story. I have a good friend, one of my best friends in Basel. His name is Michael, professor at the University of Basel. And Michael throws very good parties. Some of the best parties I've ever been to in my life were at his place. Some of them were so good I didn't even know how I got home. So a while back, I was going to organize a party, and I wanted it to be a success. So I thought I'd call up Michael and ask him, what is his trick? What does he do to make sure that his parties are a success? So we got together, had something to drink, and I started asking him questions. We talked about all the things that make a party a success. But at the end, I still wasn't sure, what do I need to do to make my party a success? So he looks at me and says, look, if you still don't understand it, I'll make it very simple. If you want your party to be a success like my party, you have to invite all my friends. Because you know, with my friends, the party will be a success. So this is actually very difficult for me because I really wanted to invite my own friends, but then I had to make a decision, do I want the party to be a success or not? And I said, look, another thing you want to do, you want to organize a DJ, someone to play music. Because, you know, at my last party, we had a DJ, and the party was a success. So what I'll do, I'll ask my DJ for his playlist, to put together a playlist of all the songs that he played and put it up on Spotify. All you need to do is play that playlist to make sure that no one makes any changes. Because you know, playing all those songs in exactly that order are the reason my party was a success. And also, because we're in Switzerland and we do everything very exactly, we'll transcribe a video of his last party that was a success. And everybody will get a script with exact timings telling them exactly when to eat and drink and when to talk to other people, because that party was a success. Now, if I do all of this, do you think my party is going to be a success or not? That's the interesting question. The answer is most probably not. And the reason for that is a phenomena of complex systems, and that's known as retrospective coherence. Retrospective coherence means that in complex systems we have cause and effect. But because of all the factors that play a role, we'll never know where we're going until we get there. Okay? Complex systems are based on outcomes and not on output, which means the goal of self-organization, of emergence, of success in the complex system is setting up the proper conditions for success and monitoring them at the end. Actually monitoring them all the way along and making corrections. So what's the secret to Michael's successful parties is that he sets up the conditions for success. What he does is he defines where the party takes place. He'll set up the container, says the party will take place in these rooms and not in other rooms. And then he organizes what we call attractors. Attractors are people or things that others get attracted to, gravitate towards, things like food and drink, like music, like a big screen television when the football championships are on. And people tend to gravitate around this. And he'll watch the interactions of people and see, what do I need to do to change the attractors to get most people interacting to make sure the party is a success. Have any of you ever been to a party? And I get worried sometimes. This is an Agile conference. I just want to make sure people get to parties. If you've ever been to a party at someone's house, have you ever noticed how many people are always in the kitchen? And ever stopped to think about that? Interestingly enough, why does this happen? The kitchen is an attractor. The kitchen provides for our needs on, if you're familiar with Maslow's pyramid of human needs, the kitchen provides with our basic needs of warmth, of nourishment, and of contact. Okay? So this is what Michael does to make his party successful. He sets up the environment, he provides attractors, and he monitors the behavior and the actions and the emergence. And if something's working well, he does more of it. If something's not working that well, he'll change that as quickly as possible. So how can you get groups of people to form and become teams? Right? We heard about changing the environment and changing the people. Let me give you another example. In a previous life, I used to be a musician. And this is a lovely guitar that a friend of mine made for me. And if you look at this guitar, you'll see that it's very delicately made and that the wood is curved and everything like that. How did he make this guitar? Well, he started off with a block of wood, and there are two things he could do with it. This is essentially changing the person, carving the wood, or changing the environment by bending it by using external influences to get it to get shaped. Now, what do you think? If you're trying to bend wood like this, what do you need so that it doesn't break? The first thing you need is heat. You need, remember what we said about dissipative systems, about energy? You need to introduce heat into the system. So this is the same technique that people who make casks for wine use. They heat the wood over a fire, and then they slowly bend it so it maintains its form. And this is what we're going to look at, is there are different ways to warm up a team, to turn up the heat, so that people will interact in different ways, and that this change will be long-lived. The first model is very simple. I'm just going to quickly show it to you. It's something known as the gas model. PV is nRT. Pressure and volume equal, that T is temperature. Okay, let's leave the N and the R out right now. This, physicists are always angry when I abuse this equation, but I can make it very simple for you. Pressure and volume equal temperature. If you change the pressure, keep the volume constant, you'll change the temperature. If you keep the pressure constant, change the volume, you will change the temperature. What does this mean for us? We can translate this very easily. Pressure are the number of things that a team has to do. Volume is the length of your sprint. Think about it. Pressure is the amount of things a team has to do. Volume is the amount of time they have to do it. And changing either of those will result in a change in the level of heat in the team that will change their behavior. So if you have a 2-week sprint, let's keep the volume stable, have a 2-week sprint, and you only have 2 things to do. Now they're relatively small. There's no stress on the team. Temperature is not very high. But if you have 2 weeks' time and you have 100 things to do, and if you don't ship that product at the end of the sprint, you all lose your job. You feel how the temperature, how the energy level warms up, and the way that people interact will change. Also, you can turn it around and say, pressure, our backlog, we have 20 items. Volume, if we change that, 20 items, we have to be done with them by the end of the year. No stress, your temperature level is low. When you say 20 items, we have to have that done next week, otherwise you're fired, temperature level rises. What we have here are 2 separate knobs that you can turn on the stove to change this. Just to complete this misappropriated equation, R is a constant that we can ignore for now. N is essentially the number of molecules of gas in this enclosed space. We can translate that to this change is also moderated by the number of people in the team. Right? If you have these pressure and volume and you have a team of 2 people, the temperature is going to be different than if you have a team of 20 people. This is a very simple explanation. This is not a model I normally use in my work. The model I prefer to use is one that comes from Dave Snowden. It's known as the Abide model. So I'd like to go through the Abide model with you and teach you then how you can use it yourself. Abide model says there are 5 knobs. There are 5 things you can change in your team to get them to act differently. First, you can change the attractor structure. Attractors might be people. Attractors might be money. Attractors might be the topic that you're working on or the technology you're working with. If you change those, you'll change the way people will act with each other. Okay? Boundaries. Boundaries and barriers define who's in the team and who's not. If you have a team, for example, with just developers and the quality of their code isn't very good, what happens if you change the boundaries and introduce testers into the team? The quality will probably change. The way the developers act will also probably change. What's important to understand is that these changes you cannot know about in advance. They're retrospectively coherent. So what you want to do is try and change one thing, monitor it, change it for a sprint, look at the end of the sprint. Did things get better? Yes, then do more of this. Did they not get better? Did they get worse? If so, then stop and try something else. Okay? Third, identities, roles and responsibilities. Okay? If you change people's roles and responsibilities in a team, you'll change the way they work and change the way the whole team works. Okay? Fourth, diversity, which we used to call dissent. If you change the amount of diversity in a team, you'll change the way they interact. Okay? We found in our own experiments that teams with a higher level of diversity work better together. And last but not least, environment. If you change the physical environment, you'll change the way people then work. Interestingly enough, we have these 5 knobs that we can turn, but they're not independent of each other. So the amount of diversity, the chance to work with people from different cultures, might also become an attractor. The physical environment might also become an attractor. Ask anybody who works at Google in Zurich what it's like. Example. Understand that we don't have 5, but we have 5 factorial, 120 different combinations of things that you can change in order to have your team react and change the way they work. So how can we use this? Let's get down to this. You can use this technique in 2 ways. You can use it as an analysis and a diagnosis tool, or you can also use it as a tool to design interventions. So, an analysis tool. Let's analyze this. This story comes from one of the Scrum mailing lists. It says, the team takes this story. As a purchaser, I want to pay electronically by Visa credit card. Estimates it at 13. This estimate is heavily swayed by Dave, who's done this type of stuff before, and none of the other team has. They understand Dave, they let him estimate, and they take that. Then they go into the sprint, and of course Dave does it, and they earn 13 points for the story. Now the next sprint planning, Dave is absent. He's had a misadventure with an ironing board. He's going to be away for the entire sprint. And again, the team have another story. As a purchaser, I want to pay electronically by MasterCard credit card this time, but this time they all estimated at 20 points. They accept that it's really similar to the previous story, but they know little more than they did at the previous sprint. And of course, Dave isn't there to help estimate or help them do the story. So let's go back to Abide. Think about this. Read through this story. What do you notice about this story? What do you notice in terms of attractors, magnetic poles? What do you see for attractors in this story? Write it in the chat. What attractors are there? Any answers?
So far, we have from Anna, points you earn. Jana is saying team members' experience is an attractor.
Yeah. Right.
Then
Dave
saying,
is definitely an attractor, right?
Yeah. Then is saying knowledge the team might have gained. Then we have maybe everyone wants to work with Dave because he's experienced. The technical challenge.
Yeah. Okay, one attractor we see is Dave. Another possible attractor might be people who are in this team because they want to work on credit card processing. Also be. There's probably a very strange attractor between Dave and that ironing board. I don't know what happened there, right? But what we see is that, okay, what are the attractors we have? One personal attractor, we have some other things that we're not quite sure if people are in this team because they're attracted by credit card processing or not. Boundaries, barriers, who's in and who's not. Is there anything we can say about that here? Any answers? Put them in the chat. Anything you notice about who's in and who's not in the team?
We get some answers. Dave seems to be working alone on the feature. Dave was in, not anymore.
Mm-hmm. Right, we have a change in boundary there. Yeah. Something else that's missing, I don't see anything written there about testers, right? So one thing you would want to do if you're using this technique and go in and say, okay, what does it look like in terms of team composition? In terms, do you have testers there? Okay. Do you actually have a product owner who's available to answer questions for the team if Dave isn't? Where's your PO? Okay. Identities. What roles and responsibilities do people have in this team? What can you say about that? Answers in the chat.
I see developer.
Mm-hmm.
Then, well, there are different types of developers. And then Dave and the rest of the team.
Yeah, that's essentially what it is. It's identities. Dave is the guru, and then there's the rest of the team, right? What about diversity? What do you think? Does the team have not enough diversity? Does it have the right amount, or does it have too much diversity?
Lorenzo is writing the ones experienced with CC processing and others.
Do they have not enough diversity? Do they have too much diversity? Or is it just the right amount?
So Anna and Anna are saying not enough, and Sarah is also saying not enough.
Not enough. Actually, it's interesting here. This is one that I used to get caught on in the beginning a lot. The answer is there's too much diversity. There's not enough commonality. If you have, in terms of technical diversity, too much diversity, you don't have people who can do the same thing. And this is the problem, is that Dave is the only one. Okay?
Actually, we got a question beforehand from Lorenzo. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Could I please get a reference of the experiment that shows that more diversity improves outcomes?
Yes, I can. Yvonne asked me about that later. You know what we're talking about. Yeah. Sure. There's a lot of work. We'll talk about all this stuff. We have a half hour afterwards to chat about all this, and I can give you all references and everything. Okay? That's actually the basis of a totally different talk. But let's finish up. Environment. Is there anything we can see about the environment here? Okay, there's not much. The only thing I read about the environment is that ironing board, and I'm really getting worried about that. But also, there's a lot of stuff in here that you really need to think of in terms of this team and their process. Right? Think about how they are estimating. If you see the numbers 13 and 20, what does that mean? What does that tell you about their estimation process? Right? Points also tells you something, right? What gets me worried, okay? I personally have a problem with story points, but what gets me worried is the last sentence in the second paragraph that says they earn 13 points for the story. Earning points? I earn points when I go buy gasoline for my car, and when I get enough, I get, some kind of pint of water for free or something like that. What do you mean they're earning points for doing stories? This tells you a lot about this. Okay, so what we see now is we've gone through and analyze this using this model, asking what are the attractors? Is there anything we might want to do in terms of attractors? An attractor-based intervention. Is it something we might want to do in terms of a boundary-based intervention? An identity-based intervention? A diversity-based intervention? Or an environment-based intervention? Now, thinking about this, you can start thinking about, well, what kind of interventions, what can I do to start changing the behavior of this team? This is very challenging and very difficult in the beginning. But don't worry about that, because there are other people who've thought a lot about this. One of the best books I can recommend is this. Fearless Change is a collection of patterns by Mary Lynn Manns and by Linda Rising that deal with issues like this. They deal with issues more at the enterprise level, but still they have a number of patterns. You can say, okay, why don't we try doing this? Okay? So, group identity. You might want to take a look at how this group identifies themselves as a team. Give them a chance to redefine themselves. Do they really want to be known as the ones who are incapable of doing credit card processing unless Dave is there? Or another one, now, mentor. Have Dave take over a new identity and a new responsibility. Tell him his job is not to write that software himself. His job is to ensure knowledge sharing and quality by mentoring and helping others to be able to do that. Time for reflection. Retrospectives. Have them stop during a retrospective and take a look at what's happening here with us. What can we do to change this? Okay. Books like Fearless Change are full of these. And I need to find out if it's still online or if I can get a copy. I have a dear friend named Luca Menudo, an Italian who used to be my Scrum Master at Ferrari. And he went through all these patterns and mapped all of these Fearless Change patterns to abide. So if you say, I'm looking for an attractor-based intervention, but I'm not really creative, what kind of attractor-based interventions are out there? So change the environment, change the people, vice versa. Thanks for that. So let me see if I can get back and stop sharing my screen. Oh, there you are again. Hi, welcome back.
Great.
So.
Yeah. So we had one question from Thomas when we were at the picture with the elephant in the room.
Mm-hmm.
How do you coach Agile Scrum teams to be more responsible and accountable for their work?
I don't know. I don't know doesn't mean that I'm trying to avoid the question. I don't know means that I need to have a lot more additional context in terms of what can you get away with in that organization. And the challenge with a lot of organizations is the fact that people can avoid taking responsibility. Right? There are companies in Germany, at least that I've worked with, where their workers' council and everything is so strong that as long as you don't kill someone, you cannot get fired. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with people who don't need to do anything because nothing's going to happen to them? This is a big challenge, and the basic thing that I try to do is take a look for what kind of motivation do they have. Look at what their intrinsic motivation is, and to be honest, for some of them, it's just going to be, I want to have a job where I come in at 9 o'clock in the morning, somebody tells me what to do, I do it, and I leave at 5 o'clock. And there will be some people who are like that, you're not going to be able to get to work in an agile way or in an agile team. Yeah.
Thomas, does that answer your question?
It seems he says thanks. So I'm always happy to expand on this stuff, but right now I would need to know a lot more about. Okay, something just popped into mind. Attractors. Attractors. What can you do in terms of attractors, in terms of bonus structure? That would be an attractor-based intervention. Bonus structure doesn't necessarily have to be that senior management and that HR pays you more money at the end of the year. Bonus might be that you as coach or as scrum master, ask for 100 euros and take the team out for a drink to celebrate successfully finishing a sprint. I've achieved a lot on spending my own money and not having to spend very much of it, like that. Okay? And it's quite interesting that you, once again, you never know if an intervention is going to be successful or not. So what you do, this is one of the things I learned from Kent Beck, is that for anything we did, we'd say, let's try this. Let's experiment. Let's see if this works or not. And we would set a sunset date. Let's try this for 1 sprint. Let's try this for 2 sprints. At the end of that time, we would have an official discussion about it. We wouldn't make that part of the retrospective. We would make it an official event to discuss the results and our impressions from this. Okay? And then, if the team decided, yes, we want to continue doing that, then they've committed to it. And an interesting thing is that, if you're working as a scrum master or something, you have no authority. You can't tell people to do something or not to do something. But you can hold them to something that they've committed to. Look, you've committed to, as a team, to doing things this way. Why aren't you doing it? Do we need to have a conversation again or not? It's actually interesting. One thing I did a number of years ago, working in Berlin as CTO at an online company, was the fact that they were sitting in small rooms but trying to work in big teams. They had rooms for 4 people and we had 8-person teams. So I suggested for one of the teams, why don't we move into a different office where we can fit everybody in? And they said, no, we're afraid that would happen, that we'd be disturbed by noise and stuff. I said, okay, let's try this for 1 sprint and see what you think afterwards. So we moved over for 1 sprint. At the end, we discussed it, and they said, yes, actually, our interaction is a lot better, but we're still worried that sometimes the sound level gets too high. So what did I do? I did 2 things. 1, I went out and I bought a life-size poster of a London telephone booth. And I put that poster on the door to a very small room that they had and said, look, if you have to make a phone call, you go out and go into the phone booth. Cost me 10 euros. Another 90 euros I gave them and said, look, what I would like you to do is go out and buy a disco ball, a laser light, and an Arduino processor, or Arduino or Raspberry Pi, and a microphone. Because these were geeks. They loved hacking. And what I had them do was write code to upload to the processor that if the sound level got above a certain volume, the disco ball would start rotating and the laser light would go on, and everybody in the office knew this is too loud, we have to turn these things down. This is the stuff we used to do in the beginning of the 2000s when we started working with continuous integration. I actually had a team that went out and stole a traffic light. And I can't tell you any more about that, but they actually went out and stole a traffic light and one of the geeks wired it up to the continuous integration machine. And when the build worked, the light would go on green. When the build was running, the light would be yellow. And if the build broke, the light would turn red, and everybody in the office would see it. These are the type of things that I do that, yeah, they've cost me money, but they've been so motivating for the teams that I think the financial investment was really good for it.
Great. We had another question when we went to the topic changing the environment from Lorenzo. He said he's very happy with his team behavior, but the extended team, mostly bosses, don't always buy in. And his question was, how can I bring them on board to the self-organized system?
How can you, so essentially what you're talking about is a boundary-based intervention, right? That you're thinking about how can we change the boundaries and bring them in? Once again, I don't know. I can't give you a real concrete answer right now, but the direction that I would take first, and this is just very vague, is ego. Appeal to their ego. Is there a way that they can personally or professionally take advantage of the fact of being associated with this project? That's one thing to look at. Another is to make sure that you get them into retrospectives and things like that, where they get the feeling that, yes, my opinion will be heard and it will be taken seriously by the team. Those are the first things to do, is that once you see that, oh, we're interested in your opinion, that's ego stroking, and we're taking your opinion seriously, something comes up on the backlog as a result of it, that tends to help them. And now what happens, and this is one of the ideas that Schwaber once said in Scrum, is that anybody can put things in the backlog. One person prioritizes. That's the product owner, right? So this stuff gets on the backlog, but somehow something else is always more important. So it never gets done. But we've taken your input very seriously. We accept that. And also, if you're using modern backlog prioritization techniques and stuff, you can actually explain to them and quantify why something else is prioritized higher. Okay? Okay.
Great. Then we have all questions covered.
Okay.
We can move on.
Two more things. How much time do we have? We still have 20 minutes or so, right?
We have, at least 20 minutes.
Okay. I'm winging it right now. I'm just improvising, just so you know. Let me take a look here. Oh, this is one. Let me just bring up a slide from my one-day course. And this is one that I have people just do for themselves, but it's also an exercise that I think you might want to, take and pass off to your management. I'm going to try to share the screen again. Okay. And full screen. How far will you let a team self-organize? Think about it for yourself. All right. Do you agree or disagree with these statements? What does your team look like? Do your team members want to be told clearly and in specific detail exactly everything that they need to do? Do you have team members who want more responsibility for their work? Do you get the feeling that the team members must be pushed or pressured in order to do their work? Or do you think that they do their work best when they're given rewards, especially recognition? Remember what we were talking about, ego stroking? Do you think that prodding and coaxing works better than threats or force? And just remember, the threats or force of losing a job is something due to the pandemic are also very powerful and playing a big role right now. Do you think that people want jobs that give them the leeway to figure out by themselves how to do something? Or do you think that they will try to do just the minimum they can, slag off, and this is why they constantly need to be watched? And if they're working from home, the boss has to demand that they have their camera on all the time so that the boss can see that they're sitting at home working at their computer. And even better, their internet line is going to be monitored to see that they're actually constantly writing something. Or do you want employees that enjoy work that's challenging? Taking a look at this in terms of yourself, in terms of your management, in terms of your team, is something that will give you some feedback as to how well a team will actually be able to self-organize from the personal point of view. Once again, you have an organizational point of view, things that happen outside of your team that are in an external environment that you also have to consider that would also play a role. Okay? If you want, I can make a PDF of this and send it to anyone. The best way is either write me or write Yvonne on Slack or something like that. But actually, there's something that we wanted to try out with you that just recently came up on the market. And this is Yvonne's idea. And we're just going to play with it right now. I have nothing at all planned. But we'd like to just try out a new virtual collaboration tool. Okay? I'm sorry, I haven't introduced Yvonne yet. Yvonne is our tech host. She's we call her a VIP. Not only a very special and important person, she's a virtual interaction producer. Her specialty is doing amazing things in environments like this. And without her help, I couldn't work at all virtually. And she keeps coming up and discovering new technology and stuff like that, and just showed me something recently, and we thought we haven't had the chance yet to have a big group of people. So we'd like you to, Yvonne, are you going to put the link in the chat? Mm-hmm. And then we're going to go over to another platform called Wonder, and you're going to have to just put in your name and stuff in order to get in there, but don't worry, that's all covered by GDPR. We'll meet over there and see how we can interact over there.
So before, this bit is really, really exciting. You will hopefully love it. I do. So I'll share the link with you, but beforehand, there are some things you need to know before you access the platform. Wonder is a kind of idea how you can network online. This is a thing we're actually lacking of, like where are our coffee conversations, like how can I go to someone or chase a speaker online. And yeah, we discovered this tool and wanted to try out and see if you maybe can also introduce it to your teams or to your workshops. And when I give you the link, what the platform will ask you to do is firstly take a photo of yourself. This will help us when you move around in the platform with your cursor. You will see who's who and who's on the platform. And the second is that they ask for permission to use your video and mic. You will need this to properly use all features, so please allow the platform to access your video and microphone. Additionally, you will have to mute yourself on Zoom, as you already did, because that, yeah, having both mics on doesn't work. Great, then we can start. I'll share the link to the platform in the Zoom chat. And you can move around with your cursor within Wonder and meet other people there. Let's see. If you have any questions then or difficulties, then please text me in the Zoom chat.